Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Touching You Talk Show. My name is Elder Sheila Black, and guess what? I have Dr. Sabrina Ellis on the show today. I love all of my guests, but I just get choked up with some. How are you, Dr. Ellis?
I'm good. I'm well. How are you?
I am doing good. So I often ask my guests, how long have we known each other?
How long have the two of us known each other? Well, we've only up close just since I've been in Dallas, but via telephone and all of that for quite some time. 'Cause you were taking care of my mother.
Absolutely. Mother Battles is my road dog. I love her so much. So thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me. Oftentimes, the Dr. Sabrina Ellis's of the world, it's like we feel like you guys are just immortal. We feel like you guys don't ever go through anything. We feel like you're just tough, 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 tough. But, you know, everybody's human.
You've
So I
given, you've given me an entire category, like the Sabrina Ellis's of the world.
but just up close, personal, just chatting, So we know that you're an awesome preacher, an awesome teacher, but this is just we're just gonna chat. I'm not gonna ask you to preach a word, which that
Thank
would be good. All right. So tell me about you. Where are you from?
Well, I am actually an Ohioan by birth. I was born and raised in Ohio, and I left there when I was about 18 years of age and went to Memphis, Tennessee. And I lived there for a good while because it was in Memphis that I actually started college, got married, had my first child, and then my husband was called back to Ohio, but Cleveland this time, a different city. And so um, when I went back, I was there for 30 years.
So let me ask you this. Are you like a church kid, meaning you've been
Absolutely.
in church all of your all
I'm a PK. I'm a PK. Yeah, absolutely. And not just in any church. All PKs are probably in church more than the average child, but the Pentecostal church. So that means I was in church. It didn't matter about being in school the next morning. If it's a revival, you had revival every night. You had all the events. You had church all day Sunday. So that was my life. That's that. Yes, that's how I grew up.
So let me ask you this: do you sing? I know Mother Battle sing.
No, ma'am.
Do you
No,
sing?
no, ma'am.
You don't sing?
There was a time in my long ago past that I sung with my siblings. We were a group growing up in Ohio, and we were a trio, and my mother played the piano for us, but I don't even try it anymore.
So what part did you sing in the group?
Alto.
Okay, all right. So do you remember like maybe the first song that you guys sang together as a group?
Oh Lord,
You remember?
I don't necessarily remember the first song that we sang together, but one of the songs that we did sing was at Calvary, and it started out years I've spent in vanity and pride, knowing that my Lord was crucified. So that was one of the ones that we sung. We sung More Love to Thee. And if you reached out to any of the Ohioans that knew us during that time, they would probably go down the list of songs that we used to sing. But the truth of the matter is, when we sang together, my brother was the lead singer.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. That's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, so when did you realize that you were called to the ministry?
Oh, well, it was long before I acknowledged the call. So I'll put it that way. I knew that I had a calling on my life, but I did not want to share that with my husband because I knew what he would do. um, he was always pushing me, promoting me. He was my biggest fan. Um, and I, at the time, even though I knew I had a call on my life, I struggled with being such an introvert that I did not want the responsibility of a microphone and speaking in public. So I tried to avoid that as long as I could. But um, the call, I didn't hear a voice from heaven, but there was this urgency, this drive that just would not let up. Like, you need to do something about this kind of a thing. And so eventually I did tell him that I knew I was called to ministry and I was going to shape what that looked like to avoid being in a microphone.
So you said you were going to shape what
That
it
was
is.
my plan, but it was so far from his plan. And so, yeah, that didn't work out well. So I ended up being in the pulpit, teaching, preaching, and all of that, which was part of my growing process. Yeah.
So oftentimes people, we look at the Dr. Sabrina Ellis's and we want to be just like you and we want to do everything like you. But oftentimes we don't realize what that takes. So tell me about some of the processes that you have went through from when you first realized, okay, all right, God, okay, I'm gonna do it, to now being an author, being sought out to speak all over the world. Tell me some of the processes you had to go through from then to now.
Well, it starts with my childhood, my upbringing, and being in church my entire life. I don't have the testimony that talks about I came from a miserable life of sin or whatever. I'm not saying I was saved the entire time, but I don't have the experience of the world per se. I'll say it that way. Um, so my whole life has been in church. I've been shaped by the church. And so once I was called to ministry, um, one of the things that was my sincere prayer was, Lord, you're going to have to help me with this because I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to embarrass my husband and I don't want to embarrass myself. And so the next thing was go to school. I would go to school. I think I had already completed my bachelor's degree, which was in psychology. And so when went to go to master's, I knew it would be a master of divinity. So basically preparing myself to do what I said I didn't want to do. But if I was going to have to do it, I didn't want to speak to people um, where I didn't want to be in a setting where everybody I was talking to was more well informed than I. That's how I saw it. Um, Not that I thought I had to be more educated than anybody or compete with anybody, but I needed to at least know what I was talking about, even if my perspective was different. Um, have at least have a reference. And so I went to school, continued in psychology, because at that time I thought that I would be the counselor, the professional counselor in church, and I was going to help everybody at church. Only to realize that that was a dual relationship. So even though I was doing clinical counseling, I was not going to really be able to use that in the church setting unless I dropped the pastoral title and role. And so, as it related to church, I just decided to be more of a spiritual advisor. And if I suspected that somebody needed more as it related to therapy, then I could refer them to professionals. And I developed a partnership with a counseling agency in the city for that purpose. And our church was like the first to develop something like that. And then the agency went on to develop that kind of relationship with other churches in the city. And so when I thought I was done with the masters, my husband said, now you might as well finish. And I thought, I am finished. He was like, no, 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 you just go further. But let me say, in the midst of that, while I'm doing school, my husband was struggling with cancer diagnoses, more than one time. And so for a large part of the time, he was, in treatment with chemotherapy. He never really looked as sick as he was, but I was the main caretaker while my children were going through school. And so, regular life, normal people with normal lives. And I always tried to convey that to the leadership and the membership, that our lives are not much different than yours, other than we're the leaders, or we're the family, the first family, the pastor, whatever, the first lady here at the church. But our lives don't look much different than yours. We have our ups and downs. We have our problems. We got to get our kids through school. We got to make sure they're doing well. And, so it was a lot going on. And so in the midst of my master's program, I almost quit, or at least changed um, what my major would be, so it would be easier, because it was such a lot in the caretaking. I went to every doctor's appointment. I went to all of the treatments and sat there while, the chemo was going through his body. So I was there and at school and taking care of my kids. So that's my life. If you want it, if you can't just take what you think you see today and say I'm going to be that, because you don't know what it took for me to get to where I am today. So, and I try to say that to all women, because I know it's not necessarily just me. I'm not the only one somebody's trying to be like. I'm not aware of anybody that's trying to be just like me, but sometimes we all have these pictures of people that, and we think it's something that it really isn't. But
Mhm.
we're saying, I want my life to be just like that. But you don't know what it took to get to just like that.
All right. So you said that you were the caretaker, that you took care of your husband. So what do you say to the wife that's listening right now, who may be the caretaker and may be ready to just throw her hands up and give up? What words of wisdom? How did you sustain through all of the treatments and all of the doctor's visits?
Well,
What can you
see,
say
for
to her to
me,
help her?
well, for me personally, well, it takes a lot. It takes a lot, and for me, it had a lot to do with our relationship, because it was just things that we committed ourselves to and to each other early in the relationship. And so there was always this, we're sticking it out no matter what, no matter, and we never could have imagined that sickness would be a part of the, on the wedding day, you say in sickness and health, but you really are expecting good health. You say
Oh,
for richer or for poor, but you're hoping for richer and not for, you really don't look to experience the negative side of all of that. So when it's facing you, it really, your relationship with your partner, your spouse, has to be solid, because I didn't think about quitting him or the family or the ministry. Remember, my first thought went to back down where school is concerned, have a lesser, uh, something that's easier, that I can speed up the process and be done. Um, but at the time, I had a mentor who I shared that thought with, and her response was, Sabrina, you're going to need to finish, because when you get to the end of all of this, you're going to need those credentials. They're going to mean something. And so her thing was, I know Bishop is sick. He's going to be okay. We're praying for him. He's going to pull through. You cannot quit. Well, that resonated with me, and I decided to just take on full force and just keep moving, because it was not an option to just get up and walk away or just to leave. I think you have to reprioritize. You do have to take care of yourself, and that's what I started learning, to prioritize and think about what my needs were while I was taking care of him. So that's where I would start with that person, that may need that advice, slow down. Be sure you take care of yourself. Don't be so caught up in being the caretaker that you don't take care of yourself. Because if you get sick, then you can't take care of the person that you love. And so you have to find where the balance is in all of that.
Okay, so you were the first lady of a large organization, a large church organization. So tell me what that was like. I mean, the responsibility had to have been great, being the first lady of such a large organization. I'm sure you're being pulled here and there. So, how did you balance all of the first lady responsibilities?
Well, first of all, going into that to the becoming the pastor, my husband accepting the church in Cleveland, which was a fairly large congregation, I said to him at that point, because this was going to be, even though I was a PK and my mom was a first lady, I had not been. And I said to him, whatever this mold is that everybody expects a first lady to fit into, I probably won't fit into it. I don't want to be whatever that expectation is. I haven't figured out what my role would be or look like, but I don't want to try to fit into some mold that's already been set. So I said that from the beginning. Initially, I was not in ministry. I was the wife, but from the day one, my focus was to serve and support, work with my husband. So, what he needed me to do is what I did. So, I didn't have the focus about all of the other stuff and all of the other people. I was, I became the administrator. That was my first assignment at the church, the administrator, and taking care of business, and then eventually executive pastor. So I didn't mind doing what I was doing because I was supporting him. And behind the scenes was perfect for me because I didn't have to be out front. So my role may have been, uh, it may look a lot different than the first lady that's not necessarily involved on that level. But I say to any person that is married to a pastor or a bishop or somebody that runs a large organization, do whatever you need to do to be your true self. That is so much more important than trying to have a look and be something that does not really fit who you are or your personality. Because trying to be something or somebody else can be exhausting. I mean, it can be exhausting trying to be on when you don't want to be on. And, you know, and I think people will appreciate you more for being your true self. Just that's just who you are. Of course, you have to be cordial. You have to love the people. You have to be with the people. But there are ways to still maintain who you are and be true to yourself. And I think that's what's important.
So, how do you continue to love the people when they don't love you back? And I know people don't realize that when you are the first lady, you see all of it, the good people, the good congregants, the congregants who may not be so friendly or may not, their intentions may not be pure. How, tell me about that. How do you?
Well, it happens. It's real. It's true. But I think, um, well, for me personally, because this is who I am anyway. Um, I don't like a lot of conflict. Now, it can really get tough though to ignore certain things and certain people, because when people come for your husband and your children, you turn into something else.
All right, all
Which,
right.
and there's a something that says, now wait, hold on. And you don't have to lose all of your salvation to be able to handle conflict. I know a lot of times people go there, but I don't think you, I know you don't have to lay down and be a mat either, a floor mat, and let people walk all over you. So I do believe that you have to be firm and let people know, now I'm not going to just take this because this is what you want to do or because you don't agree. You are allowed to disagree, but disagree respectfully. And so a lot of that has to come from the leader, the pastor, the husband. I was fortunate enough that my husband made it clear who came first. In a lot of ministries, the people are aware of the fact that they come first. But in our house, my husband he was clear about who was first. You didn't serve him a plate of food without serving me first. And I was like, no, serve him, give it. And he was like, no, serve her. He was quick to say, if people were all over him speaking and greeting him, did you see my wife? Did you see her? You know, but that's who I was married to. So I was fortunate in that. And I think that that's what that it becomes the spouse's or the husband's responsibility to make it clear that his wife will be respected, his children will be respected. And then, but that husband can do that also when his house is in order. When everybody in the house knows how to respect the people as well. So
Right.
it goes back and forth. But these things are done when people are intentional about building relationships. When they actually, because you're asking the questions and they're good questions, but those who are in leadership from top tier to second tier and 3 tiers, however many tiers, if they're everybody is on the same page as it relates to how relationships will be built from the top down, then it is a smoother ride, if you will, I believe. But I believe the leader has to be the one to put those things in place.
So, how do you encourage the first lady who may not have the strategic order that you had in your household, and maybe the people do come first? How do you encourage her to not give up?
Well, the first thing I would say is not to continue to sit there quietly as if you're not bothered when you are bothered, because um, frustration and even anger will continue to build up. And the thing about stuff like that, if you don't deal with it, you may think you're squashing it, but what's going to happen is you're going to explode one day in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're going to embarrass everybody, including yourself. So the best thing to do is start a conversation with your spouse with what's bothering you. But you need to go to your husband, yes, as your husband, but also as your pastor, and be clear, be honest, be respectful. You're like, this is my husband, and what do I what respect? No, well, that might be part of the problem if you don't respect your husband, even as your husband. But I feel like if you have a conversation and say, these are the things that are bothering me, then the two of you can decide uh, if these are things that these are really concerns that can be addressed. If it's something that you as the first lady can address, is it something that's major enough for your husband to address? And but you have to talk about it. You has to start there, because if you're complaining and talking to everybody else, the problem's never going to get settled. So I would encourage that person that may be struggling in some area, that it starts with your spouse. And if the two of you make each other first, then that's the key. That's going to be key, because it
That's
becomes us versus them.
that's good. That's good. The power of agreement
Absolutely.
is a bond that nobody can break if you've got that agreement going.
And
So
I'm a
you
witness that nobody can break it. It's not that people don't try, but when you have that kind of bond, nobody can penetrate that.
So you have written how many books?
I've written 3 books.
Okay, so let's talk about your books.
Okay, the first one I wrote was really a part of my dissertation after I finished school, and it had to do with advancing church renewal for the 21st century. So it's more technical, if you will, because it's my dissertation based off of the research and the reading that I did for church renewal. The second book, actually, I got it backwards. The very first book I wrote was "And the Women Came First." I wrote that before the book on church renewal. I wrote that. It's very interesting how that came about. We were having an Easter sunrise service one year, and I was the preacher for the sunrise service, and I talked about the women who went to the tomb first, and the message became so powerful while I was delivering it. I knew it was turning into something else. And I was like, this is crazy. What's going on? What's happening? And ultimately I did write the book about women in ministry. That's ultimately what it's about women in ministry. We know that even today, in the 21st century, in 2023, there are so many people that really have a problem with women in ministry. They feel like women are not called. Um, but that's what that book is about. It's very simple, and it just gives scripture and very honestly proof that God did use women. And then the last book, which is the more recent book, is called Wife Life: Securing Your Future. And I wrote that book because of my concern of all the years I've been growing up in church and watching um, first ladies lose their husbands, and their lifestyle changes so drastically. Um, and whether they lose them to divorce or death. Um, and I would see this time and time again, and never really talking about it, but developing a passion over time for women who were not prepared or left in a position to be able to continue, maybe not a lifestyle equal to what they had been having, but it became so drastically different. Um, and in the book, I even talk about my early years as a teenager and my parents divorcing, and even how my mom's lifestyle changed so drastically. And so by the time I wrote the book, I had pretty much had enough because at that point, I started thinking about, okay, ladies, when are you going to do something for yourself? When are you going to make sure that business is straight so that you are taken care of if your husband should pass? And so the book kind of outlines, not ideas, but things that you should be doing to make sure that should you lose your spouse, that your business is in order. And it's actually good for men and women, but my passion was for women and still is, so that you make sure there's an insurance policy with your name on it as the beneficiary. Something that simple. We get excited about the wedding day and the bliss, and we talk about the house we're going to buy, the car we're going to buy, how many children we're going to have, but nobody wants to talk about until death do we part. What does that look like? We all know there's a life cycle. We know people die every day, but we really don't want to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it. And the irony for this, to me, for this whole thing is I wrote the book in 2019. It was to be launched in 2020. Pandemic hit, so I couldn't launch it like I expected to. By the end of 2020, I became that widow. And so, I'm just glad that I learned what I learned when I did. I wish I had learned much earlier in my younger days, but it's usually the young people that really don't want to talk about this stuff. Um, so I'm okay. I tell people I'm not filthy rich or nothing, but I'm okay. I can live comfortably because I knew what to do early enough to ensure that I would be okay. And then my husband did as well. You know, something as small as, and I hope I don't sound like I'm rambling, but I hope somebody is hearing me. But just something as small as making sure both our names were on everything, both our names were on every bank account. You know, there was his bank account, my bank account, and then the house account where we, so, but we knew that. So even if it was my mad money, his name was on the bank account and vice versa. I didn't touch his, he didn't touch mine, but I could if I needed to. And it made sense, especially with him being sick off and on. Which ultimately, and let me just say the advantage in that is that when I went to the bank after he passed, I had no problem getting the money. Um, if you're not on that account, that money just goes into thin air. You don't get it, you don't touch it. If your name is not on the account as a signer, you should at least be a beneficiary. So after my husband passed, I go back to the bank. They have death certificate and everything, but I added my daughters now as beneficiaries. They can't write no check. They can't go to the ATM or anything like that. But when something happens, or if something happens to me prior to something happening to them, at least they can go to the bank and get whatever is there. So these are the kinds of things that this last book is about, to tell everybody, get your business in order so that you can have a funeral and then live past that.
That is so good. And I want to tell a story of a young lady that I met, and she and her husband were in their 30s. They had just got married, they had just bought a house, they had just bought a car, they had just had a child. And then the husband unexpectedly passed away. So then, when you talk about a lifestyle change, that's what happened with her, because her one income could not sustain the everything that they had accumulated and bought together. So this information is so valuable. Oh my goodness, thank you for writing this information. And just think about the nightmare that she went through trying to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
She
There
had
are
to sell
so
her house.
Yeah, there are so many stories. And the truth of the matter is, insurance is really intended to be income replacement. So, like you mentioned, her husband passed away. So there's no longer that income. When my husband passed away, but not only did he have a salary from the church, but he was preaching everywhere. So that was income. When he passed away, all of that went away. I no longer had any of that. So my salary plus all of his money coming in is no more. It's no more. And so people don't really think about that. And you think, well, I'll just live off of Social Security. Maybe if it's still around, but it's not that much money. It's not that much. And what you've been accustomed to doing. And so this young lady now has got to take care of a baby. She has a child without a spouse, less income. She can't, more than likely, can't keep that house and that car, you know. And these are just, this is reality. This is not stuff made up. And then how about the wife that discovers after her husband passes that the house does not have her name on it at all? She's not the one to inherit the house. So now this is somebody that has to mourn twice. You got to grieve twice. You grieve the loss of your husband, and now you're grieving the loss of your house. You got to pack up and get out of a house that you thought belonged to you.
Wow.
It's deep. It is, and it's nothing that you really want to think about. But let me just say that I have a friend who was listening to me have this conversation, and the book wasn't out yet. I was talking about it. And she started thinking, and she said, wait a minute, I need to go home and take care of some business. She was a second wife. First wife had passed. She said, I don't think my name is on everything since the passing of the first wife. And sure enough, I told her, I'm going to give you 2 weeks and I'm checking in to see if you. And sure enough, she went home, got the insurance policy straight, all the property that he owned, had her name added to it, all of that. And I was so proud of that. Do you know this woman's husband died the same day my husband died?
Oh my goodness.
The same day.
Wow.
She's a friend, but the point is, she came back to thank me for having this conversation with her. So now his adult children couldn't do anything about what he left to her. There was nothing they could do. Whatever, if they were frustrated or upset about anything, there was nothing they could do about it. In my case, the probate attorney told me when she wanted to know how certain things were written and what came after certain things. I can't think of the actual term on the house deed, on the deed for the house. But when she asked me about it and my name was there, she said, oh, we don't even have to read a will. You're good. You're good. Everything is yours. Because we thought about each other and everything was the same for me. If something happened to me, everything goes to you. You make all decisions. You do everything. So if the husband and wife may not want to do it just like that, you may have others that you want, but you need to be clear about who gets what so we can stay out of the courtroom.
That's good. That's good. And may I present one more horror story? That no, I'm so serious. I have a very dear friend who lost his son, and his son, he did know that he was going to die. Because he was dealing with some health issues, but the son had put money. The son knew he was going to die, and the son put money aside in his account to be buried. But the father couldn't get to it because his name wasn't on it.
Right.
And right. I think it took him years. He had to pay for the funeral out of his pocket and then fight for years to just get his son's money out of his account.
He was able to get it eventually?
Eventually.
Wow. Because usually they just shut you down and tell you can't do anything about that.
I don't know what he did. I don't know what he did, but
yeah, he was obviously able to prove. But look how much money he had to spend to get to it.
Right, right. So these are great principles. I mean, we all can use this regardless to whether we're married or not, to just make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row.
Right.
So
right.
that if something does happen to us, and for those of us who aren't married and our kids will have to do it, make sure and have right. everything lined up where your kids can do it. Well, that's good. I am so happy and proud that you wrote. I'm gonna have to get the book though, especially the first one you talked about, the women in ministry.
Yeah, you can go to sabrinajellis.com. That's my website, and you can order the books there, sabrinajellis.com, and they're available on Amazon.
Okay, all right. So, which brings me to the point of your ministry that you have co-founded, Life After Loss. Yes. Tell me what made you decide to start that ministry.
You know, it was not something that was planned. Another friend of mine lost her husband 2 years before my husband passed. We were all friends. And so after my husband passed, she would call and check on me, just, hey, Ellis, how you doing? What kind of day is it? And so we'd end up talking after texting just to share widows' stories, because both her husband was also a bishop. And we were like, I can't believe we're in this space, that kind of thing. And what it felt like, people not really knowing what to say to us or how to handle us, down to, for her especially, not knowing where to seat her when she shows up at events. The awkwardness that we knew people were feeling, and we like, just be normal. So the longer we talked about this and shared this, at some point, I don't know who said it first, me or her. We said, let's just go live on Facebook. And we've been doing it since December of last year, once a month. And it's just a conversation where we are transparent about how we feel. We talk about the triggers. We talk about, you know, the people that have been coming on are amazing, and they've shared how much they've been helped, because they're wanting to know, how long am I supposed to feel like this? And we're like, there's no date stamp for grief. You have women asking, how long am I supposed to wear my wedding ring? I don't have mine on today, but I normally wear mine, and my girlfriend doesn't. She took hers off. And it was a perfect example of saying, who said you had to take it off? Or if you want to take it off, take it off. But this is the whole thing about trying to follow people's expectations of you. And the two of us, we're showing others that we decided we didn't want to play that game. We're going to do what we want to do, and we're going to do what makes us feel better. And we encourage you to do the same. So, the things that people experience, especially coming up on the holidays or the anniversary of the passing of a loved one. So we just talk about the losses. It started with, of course, us because of the widowhood, but any loss, child, siblings, job, divorce, you experience grief after a loss. And so the conversation has been just us talking and sharing, and the transparency, I think, is what is a blessing to people. You're not crazy. You do feel what you feel, and people are probably really irritating you. Yeah.
So, and that's what. So, what do you recommend that people say? You said something that was key. People don't know what to say. You just want them to be normal.
Yeah. Well,
What should they say? I mean, people don't know what to say. So, what should they say?
Well, there's a list of things that you can talk. But what's interesting is, before we got started with this conversation, I told you there's another book in the wings. I just haven't had it published yet. And that book is about that, helping and not hurting. Sometimes, especially in church, we think we have all the answers for telling somebody how to grieve. And for the most part, what we want is for them not to cry. We don't want them to grieve at all. We give them all of these scriptures and whatnot, as if the scripture is suggesting that we don't grieve. Jesus grieved.
Absolutely.
Jesus wept when his friend Lazarus died.
Absolutely.
There are other times when Jesus he actually felt fear. We talk about him feeling all of our infirmities, and that's, he was human and he became human so that he would, but we want to leave grieving out, like, and so I've been in situations where I have a girlfriend that lost her son to suicide, and at the funeral, somebody went to her when she broke down, went to her and told her, oh, no, 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 don't do that. You can't do that. You got to keep it together. Keep it together. I almost said her name. Oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't. But it's not realistic. It's not realistic. And so I don't believe we should tell people not to cry. That's number one. Let them feel what they feel. Stop snatching up the tissue and shoving it in their hands, because that is still a subliminal message. Don't cry. I think our presence means more if we don't know what to say, because it is awkward. If you don't know what to say, it's best not to say anything. And what I've come to realize is, for some, even I'm praying for you, something that we should be okay with as church people, right? can be irritating to some because I don't care about prayer right now. I'm grieving. These are
That's
real
good.
feelings. These people, this is what people really feel. I know what the Bible says. I know what we learned in church. I can quote the scriptures. I don't want to hear that right now. What we need is empathy. That put yourself in my shoes for a few minutes and try to really feel and understand what I am feeling. Sympathy is just acknowledging the loss, giving your condolences. I am aware that you have had a loss, but empathy goes a lot further. And so when you're trying to be a help to the person that has had a loss, um, it helps to ask them what they need as opposed to imposing yourself in a way that becomes frustrating or in the way, or so it's okay to check in with, do you need me to do anything for you, or how can I help? Yeah, and not assume that you know everything about how to help the person that's grieving.
That is so good. That is so good. And and oftentimes we don't know what to
It
say.
is it because it's
So,
hard. And because sometimes you're even grieving the loss, maybe not on the same level, but it is a loss for you as the helper as well. But that's when I say it's better to admit to the person, I'm at a loss for words. I don't know what to say. So I'm gonna just sit here and I'm gonna just be with you. I'm gonna just do whatever I can to support you. That goes a long way. I'd rather for you to just talk about how upset and hurt you are, because that's real, as opposed to trying to act like you don't feel it because you think you got to be strong for me. No, we all upset.
yeah.
We all upset. And I had to, even as the grieving widow, I had to come to realize that our church was grieving, not necessarily like me, but as a body, they were grieving. And so loss impacts people in ways that cannot be explained. I don't think we can adequately explain it. But unless you have experienced it, you have no idea. You have no idea. And so I think we can be healthier as a people, as a community, as church body, if we would talk about it more often. That's what we do. We shut down. That's why we don't know what to say, because we don't talk about it at all. And then when it's time to say something, it's usually the wrong thing. So I don't know. That's my opinion.
I love it though. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now I can sit here and talk to you forever, forever and ever.
Yeah, but we don't have that kind of time.
So just what's on your heart? Whatever's on your heart to say to somebody that's listening right now. Maybe they just lost a loved one, or maybe their loved one is on the brink and they're just waiting, What
Yeah.
do you say?
Well, two things, because one is for the people that are trying to support the person who is dealing with loss. And I just go back to the word empathy. Really understand what empathy is, what empathy means, what it means to be empathic, um, and try to do that. I think we would just be a better people. The world would be better if more of us had empathy, not just for people who have had a loss, but just in the workplace, in our everyday lives, just trying to understand why somebody who has been raised totally different than I have been, in a totally different environment, under totally different circumstances and context, why they don't act like I act. But we don't treat people that way. When they don't act like we act, we either go off on them or we shun them, so empathy goes a long way. And then for the person that has had the loss, take care of yourself. For me, I came to the place where the grief got to be so overwhelming, and I was trying to carry on and do things, including continue pastoring the church and do so many other things. And I came to a place one day where I said, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm done, and I'm going to take care of myself. And people are still learning 2 years later that I walked away from the church and that I actually moved to an entire different state. And I just tell them I'm at peace, and that's all I wanted. That's all I care about. Am I quitting ministry? Absolutely not, because that's part of who I am. I'm just not going to do that ministry. And so you have to find yourself, find out what life looks like without the person, if it's your spouse or whoever, your child, and make the best of the situation because they're not coming back. And so get to a place of peace. That is my whole everything for me in my life right now. I have developed boundaries and I'm keeping them in place because I plan to live a long time.
Well, that is so good. Well, thank you so much for being my guest tonight. This has been such a great conversation. I want to ask all of you to share. Everyone that's listening, make sure and share. And then finally, I'm going to ask you to pray for the people that are listening, and then we'll just let everybody go.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this. Thank you so much. Our Father and our God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time. And I thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for the people that are listening. We thank you for those who will come on later and listen. And I pray that something has been said during this time of conversation that will minister to them, that will speak to their hearts, and that will cause positive change and a new direction. Thank you for Sheila Black for doing this, for having this time, this conversation, and allow it to be meaningful and allow her to continue to grow and move in ways that people will be impacted, their lives will be impacted and changed. Bless every listener. Let their lives be better for the listening. Where there needs to be healing, please heal. Where there needs to be touched hearts and emotions, we ask that you do that. We thank you in advance because we believe that you not only hear our prayers, but that you answer our prayers. And we thank you for everything tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, again, thank you so much for being my guest, everyone. This has been Touching You Talk Show with Reverend Dr. Sabrina Ellis. Have a good day, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Good night.
Good night.